Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we've got quite a stack of sources. Really diverse stuff here.
Yeah, we're ranging from, ancient savings wisdom all the way to modern finance, even historical architecture and urban power dynamics. Yeah,
Exactly. And the goal is to pull it all together, right? To find a coherent strategy for really accelerating success.
that's the mission. We're looking for that accelerator pedal.
Yeah.
How do you achieve more faster, whether it's mastering your own habits or navigating complex financial systems or even just understanding why your city looks the way it does? It all connects.
It really does. So we'll start small, right? At the individual level discipline, goals.
The inner game.
Then we zoom out to real estate, finance, leverage, all that good stuff.
And then even wider, we'll look at the big historical forces, the kind of systemic stuff that shapes the whole playing field. Architecture, urban planning, power.
Yeah, the forces that were already there, shaping things long before we showed up.
It's like understanding your own watch, but also the giant clockwork of the city itself. So let's dive in. Where do we start?
Let's start with that inner game. Personal discipline, setting goals. Our sources really stress this isn't just about willpower, it's about systemic change rooted in identity.
That identity piece is key, isn't it? Most people focus on the outcome. I want to be rich, I want to lose weight.
Right, the goal.
But the real shift happens when you focus on who you need to become to get that result. And that's where this idea comes in.
Yeah.
Every single action you take.
Yeah.
It's like a vote for the kind of person you want to be.
I like that framing. It feels manageable. So if I want to be, say, an organized person, just spending 5 minutes tidying my desk counts, even if the desk isn't perfect.
Exactly. The tidiness isn't the main point. It's the evidence. You just gathered a tiny piece of evidence that proves you are an organized person.
Ah, okay. So change comes from accumulating that proof. Small habits, not some massive overnight transformation.
You got it. You don't need to flip your life upside down.
Yeah.
Just consistently gather those little bits of proof for the new identity, the investor identity, the disciplined person. It becomes real because you do the things that person does.
Okay, but how do we make those small actions stick? Willpower runs out. The sources talk about techniques, right? Like habit stacking.
Right. Habit stacking. This comes from work by people like B.J. Fogg and others in behavioral science. It's clever because it uses your existing routines.
How does that work?
Well, instead of forcing a new habit out of nowhere, you link it. You attach the new thing you want to do right after something you already do automatically.
Like, give me an example.
Okay, like after I brush my teeth, that's the existing habit, I will meditate for 1 minute, that's the new habit. Or after I pour my morning coffee, I'll review my top goal for the day. You just tack it on.
So you ride the momentum of the old habit into the new one. Makes sense.
Yeah, much less willpower required. Now, there's an interesting story that shows the flip side, how an external change can totally shift identity and habits. Denis Diderot, the philosopher.
Vaguely remember him. What's the connection?
So Diderot was poor for ages. Then Catherine the Great bought his library for a fortune. Boom, he's got money.
Okay.
And the first thing he does, buys this amazing, expensive scarlet robe. And that robe,
Whoa.
that single change,
Yeah.
it started a cascade.
How so?
His old furniture suddenly looked shabby next to the magnificent robe. So he bought a new desk, then new prints to the walls, new rugs. Everything had matched the robe.
Yeah. The robe forced an upgrade on his whole life.
Exactly. His new identity as man of means, triggered by that one object, reshaped his environment, his habits, his spending. It all spiraled from the robe.
That's fascinating. So if a robe can trigger spending, we can intentionally design triggers for good habits, like with habit stacking.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a bit from tiny habits to bigger strategic planning. The sources bring up this 12-week year idea. Why is that supposedly better than annual planning?
Yeah, annual plans often just fizzle out, don't they?
They do. The problem is usually focus or lack of it. With an annual plan, you might set, 20 goals you think you have all year, so there's no urgency.
Yeah.
You put things off until like November.
This seems familiar.
The 12-week year forces that urgency. It compresses the time frame, and it forces you to be ruthless about priorities. You can't maintain peak performance on 20 things.
So you pick just, 1 to 3 big goals, the ones that will really move the needle in those 12 weeks.
That's the core idea. You identify the few strategic things that will have the absolute greatest impact. Everything else, it waits.
Okay. And how does that translate down to, like, weekly tasks?
This is crucial. Your weekly plan can't just be a to-do list of random urgent stuff. It has to flow directly from those 1 to 3 big 12-week goals.
So every task on the weekly plan should be strategic. directly pushing one of those main goals forward.
Yes. If a task, even if it feels urgent, isn't actually contributing to those key 12-week objectives, it's technically a distraction in this system.
Yeah.
You have to be disciplined about what makes it onto the weekly plan.
That sounds intense. Requires serious accountability, I imagine.
Absolutely. And the sources say something interesting here. The best discussions, the most productive ones, happen when you miss your targets, not when you hit them.
Really? Why is failure the better learning moment?
Because hitting the target feels good, but you might not know exactly why it worked. Missing it forces you to stop and analyze. You have to confront reality.
Okay.
The key questions then become, for yourself or your team, okay, we missed, what are we going to do differently next week? And just as importantly, is there anything we can do to help? It shifts from blame to fixing the process.
But how do you know what to fix? Is the plan itself bad, or did we just not follow the plan?
Great question. That's why you need to track two things. Leading indicators, are you doing the activities likely to produce the result?
Yeah.
And your execution score.
Execution score.
Yeah, basically. Did you do the critical tasks you said you were going to do this week? If your execution score is high, say 85% or more, but you still missed the goal.
Then the plan was probably wrong.
Exactly. That's a planned content failure. You need a better strategy.
Yeah.
But if your execution score is low, you didn't do the work, then it's an execution failure.
It's a discipline problem.
Right. You can't fix the issue if you misdiagnose it. Knowing whether to fix the blueprint or, get the builders working harder, that clarity is vital.
That makes so much sense. Okay, let's pivot that same level of discipline towards building wealth. We need to talk about the richest man in Babylon. Timeless stuff.
Absolutely foundational.
Oh.
The core lesson is almost brutally simple. Keep at least 1/10 of everything you earn for yourself.
Sounds obvious, but most people don't, do they?
Nope. The book calls it foolish. You pay the landlord, the grocer, everyone else, but you treat yourself, the earner, like an afterthought. You pay yourself last, if at all.
So the wise approach is flipping that completely. Paying yourself first. That 10th comes off the top, always.
Yes. Treat that saving, that investment contribution, like any other mandatory bill. It's not optional. And the real wealth accumulators, the millionaires profiled in other sources, they take it even further.
That's sick.
Think Sir John Templeton. Early in his career, he lived on only half his income so he could invest the other half. They don't just pay themselves first. They pay themselves first, second, and last. Saving, reinvesting. It's the absolute top priority.
And the power is in that save money working for you, right? The
Oh.
slave working for you idea.
That's the magic of compounding, yes. Each dollar saved becomes a worker generating more dollars. But saving is only step one. You have to protect that capital.
Which brings us to the 5 laws of gold. Basically, ancient risk management.
Pretty much. Long before complex finance, these laws outline how wealth gets lost. What are the main ways?
Okay, let me see. Investing in stuff you don't understand. Fields you're unfamiliar with.
Right. Number one. What else?
Following advice from tricksters or schemers promising crazy returns. Getting lured in by hype.
Very common. And the third.
Trusting your own inexperience or emotional gut feelings instead of getting solid advice.
Exactly. So the takeaways are knowledge, caution, and seeking expert counsel.
Yeah.
You need those alongside the discipline of saving.
Okay, so build the right identity, execute a focused plan, save diligently, and protect that capital wisely. That sets us up perfectly to talk about applying this in the modern world, especially with leverage. All right, moving from ancient Babylon to modern markets, we have to talk about risk and return. It's not a free lunch, right?
Definitely not. This is fundamental. Higher potential returns always come with higher risk. Always. Look at stocks, for example.
Okay.
Small company stocks historically have given higher average returns than, say, large cap stocks or bonds.
Yeah.
Since 1926, the data shows that.
There's always a but.
But the volatility, the standard deviation, the wildness of the swings up and down is way higher too. So, yeah, the average return might be better, but getting there involves a much scarier roller coaster ride.
And what does that higher volatility mean practically for, someone listening?
It means bigger potential losses, more unpredictability. If you're playing in those high-return, high-risk areas, you absolutely must be prepared for long stretches where you make nothing or even lose money.
Like the 70s stock market or after the dot-com bust. Years of negative return.
Exactly. Could be 5 years, even longer sometimes. So if you need that money back quickly or if you panic sell during a downturn, you lock in those losses.
Which brings us back to defense. Murphy's Law, right? If something can go wrong.
It will. and usually at the worst possible moment. As one commentary put it, Murphy was an optimist.
Huh. So what's the defense against that, especially if you're taking on investment risk?
Solid financial footing. You need cash reserves, liquid money, easily accessible. Think 6, maybe even 12 months of living expenses, and good insurance. Health, disability, property, the works.
So you can ride out the storms. You don't get forced to sell your investments low just because your boiler blew up or you lost your job.
Precisely. Staying power is crucial in volatile markets. Now let's apply this kind of rigorous thinking specifically to real estate investing. This isn't like buying your dream home based on feelings.
Right. Income property value is about the numbers, cold, hard numbers. And the key number is NOI, net operating income.
NOI is the absolute bedrock. It's how you value income-producing properties dispassionately. It tells you how profitable the property itself is.
Before what? Before debt and taxes.
Exactly. Before you account for the mortgage payments, debt service, before income taxes, and before any capital recovery like depreciation, it isolates the property's pure operational profitability.
Okay, so how do you calculate it? Walk us through that.
You start with your gross operating income, or GOI. That's basically all the rent you could collect, minus an allowance for vacancies and tenants who don't pay, your realistic total income.
Got it. Potential rent minus vacancies.
Then, from that GOI, you subtract all the necessary operating expenses. Property management fees, maintenance, repairs, utilities the landlord pays, property taxes, insurance.
Everything it costs to keep the property running except the mortgage and income tax.
Correct. What's left is your net operating income, NOI. If you bought the place for cash, NOI is pretty much your cash flow before income tax.
And investors use this NOI.
They use it to figure out what the property is worth. They'll apply something called a capitalization rate, or cap rate, to the NOI. It's a way to compare different investment properties on an apples-to-apples basis, regardless of financing. It forces objectivity.
Okay, objective valuation. Now let's talk about where real estate really shines for wealth building. Taxes, specifically depreciation.
Depreciation. It's almost like a magic trick allowed by the tax code. It's basically the government encouraging investment by letting you deduct a loss that isn't real cash out of your pocket.
How does that work? You're writing off part of the purchase price.
Yes, but crucially, only the value of the buildings, not the land. Land doesn't wear out, theoretically. The IRS says buildings do over a set useful life.
And those lives are specific, aren't they? 27.5 years for residential.
Right, and 39 years for non-residential, like commercial property.
Why do those numbers matter so much to an investor?
Because each year you get to deduct a slice of the building's value, cost basis divided by useful life, from your rental income. This creates a paper loss. You might be receiving positive cash flow, but after depreciation, your taxable income could be much lower, maybe even zero or negative.
So it shields your rental income from taxes.
It's a massive advantage. One of the biggest reasons real estate is so powerful for wealth creation compared to, say, just buying stocks where you don't get this. Oh, and there's a little quirk in the first year. The half-month convention. Doesn't matter if you buy the property on the 1st or the 30th of the month, you only get to take half a month's depreciation for that first month it's in service. Just a small detail to be aware of.
Okay. What about other costs, like loan points, closing costs? Are they depreciated too?
No, those are handled differently. Things like points paid to get the loan or specific legal fees related to the loan itself aren't depreciated. They're amortized.
Amortized. Sounds similar.
It is similar in that you spread the deduction over time, usually over the life of the loan. You can't just deduct all those points in year one. It provides a smaller, steadier deduction over many years.
Got it. Now let's tackle something you said is confusing but really powerful. Selling a rental. The difference between capital gains and ordinary losses.
Okay, yeah, this is important to wrap your head around. It's kind of a heads I win, tails you lose situation favoring the investor. If you own a rental property for the long term, usually over a year, and you sell it for a profit.
That's a capital gain.
Right. And it gets taxed at the lower long-term capital gain tax rates. That's the good outcome. Lower tax bill.
But what if the market tanks and you sell that same long-term rental for a loss?
Here's the magic. Often that loss can be treated as an ordinary loss, not a capital loss.
And why is an ordinary loss better?
Because you can use ordinary losses to offset your regular income, your salary, your business profits. That income is usually taxed at much higher rates than capital gains. So, selling at a loss gives you a much more valuable tax deduction against your high taxed income.
Wow. So win on the gain with lower taxes, win bigger on the loss with the better deduction.
Essentially, yes, it's a huge structural advantage for real estate investors. Understanding that is key for strategy.
And speaking of strategy, the ultimate accelerator seems to be the 1031 exchange.
Absolutely critical for serious wealth building in real estate. The 1031 lets you sell an investment property and defer paying any capital gains tax.
Zero tax.
Zero tax now, provided you follow the rules. You have to reinvest all the proceeds into another like-kind investment property within strict time limits. You have to identify potential replacement properties quickly and close within 180 days.
The sources say, think of Uncle Sam as a temporary partner.
That's a great way to put it. The government essentially says, okay, you made a profit, you owe us tax. But tell you what, keep our share for now, put it all into a bigger property, and keep growing. We'll collect the tax way down the road when you finally sell for cash, or maybe never if it passes to your heirs.
So you're compounding not just your own capital, but the government's deferred tax money, too.
Exactly. That's why it's such a powerful accelerator. Your buying power grows much faster than if you cashed out, paid tax, and then reinvested the smaller amount.
And underpinning all of this, especially the rapid growth part, is leverage. Using borrowed money.
Leverage is the rocket fuel. It magnifies everything. If the property value goes up 10%, but you only put 20% down, your return on your actual cash invested is much, much higher, maybe 50% before costs.
But it magnifies losses too, right?
Absolutely. That's the double-edged sword we talked about with risk. But smart investors use leverage strategically. A common play involves private money.
Like hard money lenders.
Sometimes. Or loans from other individuals. You use this short-term, often higher-cost money when you think you can add value fast, like a major renovation.
Why private money then?
Because banks might not lend on a distressed property, or they move too slow. You use the private money, do the rehab quickly, increase the rents, which increases the NOI.
Which increases the property's value based on that NOI calculation.
Exactly. Once the value is proven higher, you go to a conventional bank, get a new long-term loan based on the higher value, hopefully enough to pay back the private lender and pull some or all of your original cash back out.
The BRRR strategy: buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, leaving little to none of your own cash in the deal.
That's the ideal scenario. Infinite return on paper because your cash is out and ready for the next deal while the property keeps generating income. It's peak leverage.
Okay, so we've got the mindset, the discipline, the financial tools like NOI and 1031s, and the power of leverage. But none of that works if the actual operations are sloppy, right? Execution matters.
Hugely. Leverage amplifies mistakes just as much as successes. So tight operations are non-negotiable. And that starts with building the right team.
Who's first on the list?
Your rock star agent. And I mean rock star, not just someone with a license. You need someone who gets investment real estate.
What makes them a rock star?
They're resourceful. They understand the numbers, cap rates, cash flow. They probably invest themselves. And crucially, they have a process. They've done hundreds of deals. They know the pitfalls. They have connections. They're looking to build a long-term relationship, not just get one commission.
Finding that person seems like priority number one. What about property managers, often seen as just a cost center?
But a great property manager is so much more. The sources highlight them as a seriously underutilized deal source. Think about it. The best PMs are deeply plugged into the local market. They often own rentals themselves. They know which investors might be thinking of selling quietly before a property even hits the open market.
Off-market deals, the holy grail.
Exactly. Plus, they already have the best, most reliable handymen, plumbers, electricians on speed dial because they need them constantly for their portfolio. Tapping into that network and their market knowledge gives you a huge advantage. Don't just see them as rent collectors.
Good point. Okay, let's talk rehabs. The goal isn't just saving money, is it? It's about adding value.
That's the crucial distinction. You're not just trying to come in under budget. You're trying to come in over value, meaning the money you spend should increase the property's appraised value by more than what you spend.
So spending $5 on cheap updates that only add $3 in value is bad, even if it was under budget.
Right. But spending $10 on smarter, maybe slightly nicer, finishes that bump the appraisal by $15. That's winning, especially if you plan to refinance later based on that higher value. Focus on return on investment for every rehab dollar.
Okay. Now, the handyman versus contractor distinction. This seems important for cost, but also risk.
It is. The basic difference is licensing. Contractors are typically licensed, bonded, insured. That costs more, but offers you, the investor, much more protection if something goes wrong.
And handymen.
Usually unlicensed. They can be significantly cheaper for simpler jobs, painting, minor repairs, landscaping. Using them can save you real money.
But there's a catch.
The catch is liability. If an unlicensed handyman gets hurt on your property or does faulty work that causes damage later, the liability falls much more heavily on you. It's a calculated risk. You save money up front but take on more potential downside. You need to understand that trade-off.
Makes sense. And after the rehab is done, the learning shouldn't stop. Connects back to accountability, right? Debriefing.
Absolutely. After every single project, you must sit down and review. What were the actual costs versus the budget? How long did it really take? What was the final appraised value? What went right? What went wrong?
Why is that so critical?
To find the patterns of success. Which contractors delivered? Which materials gave the best bang for the buck? What unexpected problems cropped up? You document these lessons, formalize them, and apply them to the next project. That's how you shorten the learning curve dramatically and get better faster.
Okay. Operations tight, rehab done. Now, the tenant, arguably the most critical piece for long-term success.
You could definitely argue that. A great tenant means years of steady income, peace of mind, and they take care of the place. A bad tenant, well, that's a nightmare. Stress, lost rent, potential eviction costs, property damage.
So screening is everything. The sources had a neat tip about pre-screening the drive-by.
Yeah, that's a simple but effective time saver. Before you even schedule a showing, ask the prospective tenant to drive by the property and check out the neighborhood first.
Why?
If they don't like the location, the look of the street, the commute, whatever, they'll often rule themselves out. You avoid wasting your time showing the property to someone who is never realistically going to take it based on factors outside the unit itself.
Smart. Filters out the non-starters early. And what about during the showing or interview? Using silence?
Yes. This is surprisingly powerful. Ask your questions then. Just wait. People get uncomfortable with silence. They feel compelled to fill it.
And they might reveal things?
Often, yes. They might volunteer information about their job situation, why they're moving, their past rental experiences, things you wouldn't get from just the application form. It gives you a much better feel for them as a person. Let them talk.
Good psychological tactic. Okay, finally in operations. Liability. Landlords have responsibilities. Basic safety stuff, obviously.
Non-negotiable. Handrails need to be secure, stairs safe, basic hazards addressed immediately. But environmental issues are trickier, like mold. Disclosure and quick action are key for things like known asbestos or lead paint, too.
Right. With mold specifically, where's the line between the landlord's responsibility and the tenant's? It seems like a common dispute.
The line is generally drawn at proper maintenance versus misuse or neglect. The landlord is responsible for ensuring the property has adequate ventilation, especially in bathrooms and kitchens. If there's no exhaust fan, the landlord should probably install one.
Okay, landlord provides the means for ventilation.
But the tenant is responsible for using it. If mold grows because the tenant never turns on the bathroom fan during showers, or cooks constantly without ventilation, or pushes furniture right up against an exterior wall, trapping moisture.
Then it's likely the tenant's fault, and they could be liable for the cleanup.
Generally, yes. If their actions or negligence cause the mold, they bear responsibility. Landlords need to provide the right systems. Tenants need to use them properly. Clear communication about this in the lease is also important.
Okay, we've covered the individual, the finances, the operations. Now let's pull the lens way, way back. We need to understand the larger system these investments exist within. The history, the structures, starting with architecture itself.
Right, because the buildings themselves tell a story. Their style reflects economic conditions, cultural values, technological shifts. A huge turning point in the U.S. was the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago.
The Chicago World's Fair, how did that influence things?
It was massive. The White City design, largely neoclassical and Beaux-Arts style, created this image of ordered, grand, classical beauty. It set a standard, especially for public buildings, banks, museums. It pushed American architecture towards a more formal, unified, classical look for decades.
And that influenced houses, too. We see distinct styles marking different eras.
Absolutely. You can practically date neighborhoods by their dominant styles. Like a stick style with its visible stickwork framing that's mostly 1855 to 1875, earlier Victorian.
Oh, no.
Then you get the Queen Anne style, think asymmetrical shapes, towers, porches, lots of ornamentation dominating from roughly 1880 to 1910. Those are the ones people often paint in bright boutique colors today.
Right, the classic painted ladies.
Exactly. But then later on, you see periods maybe lacking that strong stylistic cohesion. You get kind of pseudo-styles, like the way builders slapped mansard-style roofs on everything in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, that weird sloping roof line on apartment buildings and houses.
Or the really bold, sometimes strange Supermannerist stuff from the 60s and 70s. Each style tells you something about the period it came from. Oh, and a fun interior design tip from one source.
Yeah.
The 145 principle for hanging pictures. The center of the picture should be at 145 centimeters, which is about 57 inches, off the floor. Apparently, that's the average human eye level, the optimal viewing height used by museums.
57 inches, good practical tip. But beyond style, the way cities grew changed dramatically, too.
Yeah.
Suburbanization, what drove that huge shift?
It was really a combination of things. First, mass transit got better and cheaper, horse-drawn omnibuses, then electric trolleys, commuter rail. This let people, initially the middle and upper classes, live further from the city center where they worked.
Commuting became feasible.
Right. And the second huge factor was a technological change in home building, the balloon frame house.
Balloon frame, what was that and why did it matter so much?
It completely changed how houses were built. Before balloon framing, you had post and beam construction, heavy timbers, complex joints, skilled carpenters needed, slow and expensive.
Okay.
The balloon frame used light, standardized lumber like 2x4s, held together with cheap, mass-produced nails. Construction became incredibly fast, much cheaper, and required less skill.
So houses could be built way more quickly and affordably.
Exactly. Suddenly, owning a private home wasn't just for the rich. Middle-income families, even working-class families, could potentially afford one. This, combined with transit, fueled the explosion of suburbs across America. It created that open suburban landscape we know.
But this growth, this suburbanization, it wasn't purely organic or accidental. Government policy played a massive role, didn't it? Especially around race and segregation.
Critically important to understand this. Federal policy actively promoted segregation for decades. Agencies like the Federal Works Agency, FWA, and especially the Federal Housing Administration, FHA.
The FHA, which backed mortgages, making homeownership possible for millions.
Yes, but they operated explicitly on the racist belief that if black families moved into or near white neighborhoods, property values would automatically decline.
That was official policy.
It was baked into their underwriting manuals. They redlined entire neighborhoods, refusing to back loans in areas with minority residents or even areas at risk of integration. The source mentions the Sojourner Truth Homes incident in Detroit.
Tell us about that.
It was a federal housing project built for black war workers during WWII. But under intense political pressure, fueled by the FHA's stance, the FWA initially tried to give it to white residents instead. They feared black occupancy would damage the surrounding white neighborhood's value.
So the government itself was enforcing segregation based on property value concerns.
Precisely. When they finally let black families move in, white mobs rioted. It wasn't just social prejudice. It was federal policy, actively creating and reinforcing segregation, arguing it was necessary for financial stability. It starved minority communities of investment and credit for generations.
Local governments reinforced this too, like Birmingham defending racial zoning.
Yes, cities fought hard to maintain segregation, sometimes arguing, incredibly, that the need to prevent potential violence or unrest caused by integration trumped black citizens' constitutional rights. They used the threat of racist reactions as a justification for segregationist policies.
The long-term impact of that must be immense on wealth, opportunity, everything.
Absolutely devastating. If you deny entire communities access to federally backed mortgages, homeownership plummets. Equity building becomes impossible. Disinvestment leads to poorer schools, fewer local jobs, which then reinforces the cycle of poverty and lack of opportunity, making it harder for the next generation to escape. All stemming from that initial racist premise embedded in policy.
This is heavy stuff, but essential context for understanding property values and urban dynamics today. It leads us straight to the ultimate example of systemic power shaping the physical and financial landscape. Robert Moses in New York.
Ah, Moses. A figure of almost unbelievable power. What's fascinating is how he moved beyond simple, old-fashioned graft. He built his empire on legal control derived from public works.
How did he manage that?
He was a master at creating systems where everyone became dependent on him, or where he could bypass normal political or financial controls. He created public authorities, like the Triborough Bridge Authority, that had their own revenue streams, tolls, making them independent of city or state budgets.
So he wasn't reliant on politicians for funding?
Largely not. And he was incredibly creative at getting resources. A story about the railroad, Phil.
Right, getting 1.5 million cubic yards of dirt for free.
Yeah. Worth millions back then. He just pointed out to the railroad that dumping it where he needed it for his parkways would save them money on disposal costs. He turned their operational efficiency into his construction material, completely outside any normal budget process. Genius in a ruthless way.
And the deal he struck with Mayor LaGuardia, that sounds almost like extortion.
It practically was. LaGuardia desperately needed Moses to build bridges, tunnels, parks. The city was broke. Moses held all the cards because his authorities had money and the power to build.
So what was Moses's price?
A complete monopoly. He demanded that his Triborough Authority get control over all future bridges and tunnels connecting the boroughs of New York City. This would guarantee his authorities a massive, perpetual stream of toll revenue.
And LaGuardia. He had to agree, even though he apparently hated the deal.
He had no choice. He needed the projects built. Moses secured an untouchable financial empire, immune to voters or politicians, funded by the public using the infrastructure. He could then use those surplus funds to build whatever he wanted, reshaping the entire region according to his vision, a vision that prioritized cars and suburbs, often at the expense of existing neighborhoods and public transit. His systemic power fundamentally dictated real estate values and development patterns for half a century. Hashtag take outro. So when you pull all these threads together, from the tiny habit loops and the 12-week plans,
Okay, the micro level stuff.
all the way up to the massive systemic forces like FHA redlining and the kind of power Robert Moses wielded, what emerges is this need for mastery across scales.
It's not enough just to be good at one thing, is it? You need the personal discipline, the financial savvy, the operational skill.
Exactly. Mastering the micro. That inner drive, the focus of the 12-week goal, managing rehabs efficiently, screening tenants well.
But you also have to master the macro. Understanding NOI, cap rates, 1031s, risk, and having that historical awareness, knowing how the game board was set up.
We've seen you need to pay yourself first, definitely. Understand that higher returns mean bigger swings, more risk. Know your NOI cold. Use depreciation and 1031 strategically. But you also got to realize the property you're analyzing sits in a city shaped by decades of policy, by figures like Moses, by historical biases that still influence values today.
Which leads to a really interesting final thought. One source talked about influence being less about overt force and more about, what was it, an unseen flow of power, like pull, not push.
Right. Getting things done without seeming to try too hard because the system is sort of tilted in your favor or you know how to navigate its currents.
Okay, so here's a question for you listening to all this. In a world where our markets, our cities are so heavily shaped by these deep, often invisible institutional systems, the legacy of FHA policies, the infrastructure built by Moses-like figures.
Is building real, lasting wealth primarily about mastering the visible stuff? The numbers, the spreadsheets, the tax code, the execution scores? Or is the deeper game about mastering the invisible forces, understanding the history, the influence, the systemic biases, the pull, and learning how to navigate that landscape to your advantage?
Which one truly drives long-term success? The numbers you can see or the unseen currents of power in history? Something to think about.